Why does Eric Markowitz need to hear this Christina Garnett and Vic Ruggiero clip? You're watching Just Press Record, and you're about to find out. I mean, we talk about resilience of systems. We talk about how leaders, their role isn't to tell, but to inspire. And we talk about breadcrumbs. Yes, leaving breadcrumbs to find your way up, to find your way down, to find your way home. Jack Forehand, let's roll some clips.
My question is, we all agree that compounding is incredibly important, but how do we survive long enough to compound? What are the fundamental ideas that we need to embody so that we're here tomorrow and we're here the next day, the next week, the next month, the next decade?
Everything that you put on social is a breadcrumb. It's going to make people think about a concert that they went to. It's going to make people think about a song or a city that they love to visit. It isn't necessarily going to direct straight to you, but then if it does send them to a positive memory, you get to be a part of that. You are attached to that little piece of their day. The way to combat the negative effects of AI is to be unapologetically human. And I can't think of a better way to describe punk than unapologetically human.
We're going from really an age of distribution where get 1 million followers on Twitter. That is no longer working. If you create something that's really, really high quality, you'll find that the engagement level is really high. Just focus on your current customers, right? Like, listen to them, make sure that they're happy. This is not a remarkably new insight. Plenty of very, very smart business leaders, like especially Jeff Bezos, has consistently talked about this. Just focus on your customer, be obsessed with your customer, and don't necessarily be focused on chasing the next one.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's actually good advice, because it's that makes it a bit more, reachable, you know?
You're watching Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube. I'm Matt Zeigler. This is a special Oh Snap Guess What I Saw episode where I invite a prior guest back onto the show so I can show a clip. I really want to get their perspective on this. Now, this is all about showing you at home the power of taking a minute to reflect and seeing what happens when you do. Like, subscribe, comment, all the things below. Let's get into introductions. He's an author, or at least he's got a book in the works. And no, it's not Mark Twain. But even though this book seems to be about why it's so rare that great ideas fail to repeat, yet good and bad alike have a striking tendency to rhyme. And he's a thinker in all directions, a big thinker of coverage, a regular crossover artist who never loses his roots. And no, that doesn't mean it's Eric's sermon, although he does bring some macadicious funk material. So simple. I really just wanted to say macadicious. Pardon me, it's a Friday afternoon. And if he ever starts a charity, he won't name it the Make-A-Wish Foundation or the Human Fund, but he might name it the Markowitz Foundation, because if nothing else, he's charitable enough to keep coming back to hang out with me. Eric Markowitz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That reminds me of, I was on the bowling team in high school, and they misprinted my name one year as Eric Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz Foundation.
The Mankiewicz Foundation, right, the end. Well, I had to have you on to do this. By the end of this, you're going to guess why I needed to show you this clip. I got the secret written down on the back of this card right here. But before we start, I know it's only been a handful of months here since you and Ellie Jacobs. What's going on? How's the book progressing? Tell us about the project.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book officially with Scribner, the imprint of Simon & Schuster, and it's called Outlast. It's a book really about a personal kind of mission around what can outlast in a world that is increasingly short-term focused. So it's a book for investors, entrepreneurs, but also creatives, artists, anyone early in their career that wants to build something meaningful for a lifetime.
And I love this concept of outlast and just asking that question. And mutual friend Matthew Stafford actually made the comment as a venture angel investor, just thinking, not only will this last, can this survive? But the question, can this outlast? How do you think about that as a question?
Yeah, it's something, it's the core tension of the book. I think that we're living in a system now that prioritizes growth and scale. And the companies that have been successful over the last 50 years are, magnificent, right? The Magnificent Seven. To me, the more interesting question is, will these companies outlast over the next 50 or 100? And what I found is that there's really just a tiny handful of companies around the world that have been around for more than a few hundred years. And so there's some companies in Japan that have been around for 1,400 years. And these have been written about in a sort of academic sense. But the goal of my book is to really sort of decode the wisdom and the principles of longevity from both these companies and also resilient systems in nature that have a fundamental wisdom that have been able to survive for so long. And so we all, I think, agree with the idea of compounding and the power of just power laws over long periods of time. My question is, we all agree that compounding is incredibly important, but how do we survive long enough to compound? Like, what are the fundamental ideas that we need to embody so that we're here tomorrow and we're here the next day, the next week, the next month, the next decade? And I think that often gets forgotten in a world that is incredibly just focused on, what's next? Like, how do we get the next quarter to be higher growth than the previous quarter? I'm a public markets investor. This is the obsession of Wall Street, just growth, 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 growth. And what you find in really like truly incredible business models is that they're not as linear as that, right? And there's cycles. And so we see it in nature, we see it in biology. Resilient systems go through cycles of growth, stabilization, sometimes degrowth. And I think that these ideas are like increasingly important in a world that has become more fragile.
Well, this is a perfect segue. We're going to jump into this clip. This is Christina Garnett. This is Vic Ruggiero, Jack Forehand. Let it roll.
Because you need to be a part of people's everyday lives.
Mm.
You have no idea that you post a story and because of that, someone puts on a vinyl or someone listens and looks for a show. And so what you are doing is you need to look at social as breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone's just assuming like, I'll do one post and that's going to like fix everything. That's not enough. Everything that you put on social is a breadcrumb. It's going to make people think about a concert that they went to. It's going to make people think about a song or a city that they love to visit. It isn't necessarily going to direct straight to you, but then if it does send them to a positive memory, you get to be a part of that. You are attached to that little piece of their day. And so how can you create breadcrumbs so that you get to be a part of their day?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's actually good advice because it's that makes it a bit more, reachable. Like I feel
Yeah.
like it's more within reach than saying, "Oh, you got to show yourself eating lunch," and it's like, God.
The way to combat the negative effects of AI is to be unapologetically human. And I can't think of a better way to describe punk than unapologetically human.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So when you're creating content, it needs to come from the lens of how can we be unapologetically human when how we talk, how we perform, where we go, and saying like, I want to play a garage because I want to jam today. I want to play. That's intrinsically human, but you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you want to play. You want to make noise.
I know there's got to be 8 parts of this that are jumping out at you right away on why I probably needed to show this to you. But I mean, let's start with this piece right here. You need to be part of people's everyday lives. Christina says, think of social media as breadcrumbs. What do you think about this? Any level you want to approach it.
Yeah, I think she's like right on the money. And I think that what is like social media, at least in the way that you and I try to use it, it's a platform for connection and for building community in its purest form. But what I think people end up using it as is just kind of a one-to-many marketing platform where you're pushing out some idea or some message that you want people to take, and whether it's to buy your product or sign up for your service, it's a push, and you're trying to sell something. And I think she makes a very good point, which is like just build content that people genuinely enjoy and want to keep coming back to because there's value in it. And instead of wanting to extract from people some value, I think the goal of social media is to flip it and say, what can I offer that is of value to my audience? And to make it really engageable, which I don't know if it's a word, but I'm making it a word. And I spoke with David Perel recently, the writing guy on Twitter, and he just makes this great point that we're going from really an age of distribution where the sort of previous format of social media was get a really, really big audience, right? Grow your newsletter to 1 million people, get 1 million followers on Twitter. And that is no longer working because actually the algorithms in a, I think, optimistic way are optimizing for engagement. So even if you only have 500 followers, 20 followers, if you create something that's really, really high quality, you'll find that the engagement level is really high. And as a consequence of that, the algorithm will benefit you. It'll push your content to more and more people. But it starts with having a really, really high quality piece of content that resonates with people, which inverts the former model of just be consistent, just put out a lot of stuff, grow your audience really big. And that was a new concept for me, especially coming from like the old media world where it's just all about scale. It's like you cannot exist as a media company, as an influencer, or as a brand unless you have X amount of followers. And I think that's actually very inspirational for thinking about how to create content, which reduces the pressure around consistency and quantity, and increases the pressure around just create something that's really, really high quality.
That's a really wonderful way to put it. Say more about what you think about this social media for connection value, for engagement value versus the marketing value. That changes the nature of the type of a platform that we even think of it as.
Yeah, I think that there's like a big kind of criticism, and rightly so, of platforms like X or even LinkedIn, that they're just kind of, crummy platforms where it's just tons of content and it's just trying to sell you something. I use X really just like a personal networking platform where not only am I like learning from other people, I'm genuinely forming relationships with people. I mean, you and I met virtually over X, right? Which a relationship on X translated to coffee in Pennsylvania one day, and now just like a friendship. And so I think the more people can think about these platforms not as like a one-to-many push, but as just a way to put out a beacon of what you're interested in, what you care about, and have the right people find you, that's where you'll find leverage. Leverage doesn't just come from scale and from reach. It comes from like genuine human connection with the people that you meet on these platforms. I think that's the fundamental hack for these systems, is to treat them not as marketing platforms, but as truly like embody the idea of like, it is a social platform. And I think you don't see it very often. You see mostly people using it as a way to push their stuff out, as opposed to like, just be the person you really are and share the things that are meaningful for you. And you'll find the right people over time.
Connect this back to Christina's metaphor of breadcrumbs. What do you think she means by that? How do you understand that metaphor?
I think of it as there's a creative impulse, especially, if you're a writer or an artist, to like fully finish the work before you release it out into the world. But the best way to build community, to build friendships, is to just share as you go, and to use it as a platform where it doesn't need to be a fully finished product. So if you are working on an essay, right? And you believe that this is like, it has to be a 5,000 word essay. I think that her idea in practice means maybe you write it as just to take the most impactful or the strongest idea and just post it as a sentence or two at first and see what happens, and then post another couple of sentences. I think that also with just video and some of the other just mediums of connecting with people, we tend to want to hold on to this idea of perfection before releasing it out into the world. And I don't think that that's necessarily the correct approach. I think just being more human and sharing little pieces as we go is probably a more like human way of doing it. And so I think the reason why short form video is so popular now is I don't think it's as cynical as everyone maybe makes it out to be. It's actually just kind of how we communicate. You walk down the street, talk to someone for like a minute or 2 minutes and keep moving. Like, that's just the natural cadence of life. You don't necessarily walk down the street and talk to someone for an hour and a half about one subject, right? You kind of hit the most important things and then you move on. And treating a platform like X or LinkedIn like that. And I think that that's kind of what she means by breadcrumbs, which is just drop little bits here and there, and people will kind of follow along. You get people into the slipstream early on into what you're interested in, as opposed to kind of like jamming it down their throat saying, read this long form thing that I wrote, or watch this 2-hour video I made.
One of the parts that got unpacked in that conversation is, so Vic's a musician traveling, running a successful band, the Slackers, for like 30 years at this point, and playing all over the world, doing all this stuff without any breakout traditional hits. But part of this idea of the breadcrumbs was giving all these paths back to like the core ethos of what this band is about. And he talks about in the interview, building that fan base, like town by town, city by city, state by state over all these years. And now it's just like, my whole goal in playing this gig tonight is just for you to come back next time with one friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally, I agree with that idea. I mean, personally, the way I'm even doing my book is I've created a website called Follow the Outlast Journey. And every week I'm sharing a new insight that I've learned from my research and my travel and my interviews. I think that the old world of book publishing was, you'd spend 2 years in a cave writing a book and then release it and hope that lots of people buy it. I've kind of inverted that whole model of saying, like, let's actually build the audience really, really, like now. Let's like get people involved. Because I'm finding a lot of like value from the things I'm learning, and I don't want to hoard all of it and then one day just release it all, because it's kind of overwhelming. I think that the reason I don't buy a lot of books is it just feels really overwhelming to read, 400 pages on one subject when I'm not previously already bought into the concept or bought into kind of what the author is trying to do with the material. This is mostly true for nonfiction. I don't necessarily know if it applies as well for fiction, but certainly in nonfiction, if you're writing about a subject or exploring a subject, I don't really see the value of holding on to it until you've reached this like perfect moment where everything has come together and suddenly it's now out in the world. Like I think of it more as just sort of like a system in itself. As I'm going, I'm ingesting material, and then I'm like sharing this sort of, I'm dusting off the rocks and showing like the shiny ones to the folks. And to me, it's also more fun because I get feedback as I go, and I know what's working. I know what's resonating with people. And likewise, if something's a total dud, then I'll say, maybe this isn't really something I should explore deeply in the book. So it's like getting instant feedback as I write something to help create a finished product that I hope will be really resonant.
How do you reconcile this with your journalism days? Like when you'd be given an assignment or you're going to go out and write something, and then you're doing the research back and forth with an editor. How's it compare?
Yeah, I think that one of the major flaws of journalism is, you go out and let's say you do 5 interviews or 10 interviews, and you've got these, massive transcripts to draw from. You end up just very selectively picking a quote or two. And I think that's led to a lot of the current frustration with journalists, which is that they cherry pick quotes and they sort of misconstrue a story. And so I'm just of the mindset of, if you open source as you go, I think I think are more fair to your subjects. Just publish the full transcript of the conversation, which I think some publications are starting to really think about. But the old mindset of journalism, and especially as I experienced it, was, you kind of start with a premise and then you execute against that premise, right? You don't start with an idea or sort of like a hunch, and then you pitch a story with kind of a foregone conclusion, which is ultimately really not the correct way of doing journalism. That is how it happens, though most of the time. You go to an editorial pitch meeting on a Monday morning and say, here's the story, here's what, I'm going to write about. I was like, great, go write it, give me 800 words. I think at a really good publication with a really good editor, you can go to them and say, look, actually, what I found is not really what I pitched, and let's change it. But I'd say more often than not, the story is assigned from top down. Hey, you're writing about this, and this is the conclusion of the story. Go find me 3 quotes to justify, what we kind of think our thesis is. So for me, as in writing the book, I'm more a learner than a teacher. I'm just learning. and I'm just trying to put out material as I learn. I'm not a teacher. I don't ever even think I'll be a teacher on the subject because there's just so much more wisdom out there than I could ever fully capture. So I think as a journalist, your job is not really to teach, it's to learn. And the purest form of journalism is just going into a story with truly an open mind and an open heart to say, I don't know what the outcome of this story is going to be. And even after I write it, it might not be fully correct, which is hard.
Really hard. What do you think from a leadership perspective? And I'm trying to draw up a parallel, and there might not be one, so you can tell me to just shut up on this. Between like the top-down editor assignment and go find me the 3 quotes, and leaders at an organization are trying to build an outlasting business. What's the difference?
I think this is like the most like kind of common frustration at any organization, which is, you have some boss or CEO that sets a vision and you have to execute against that vision. And maybe more often than not, there's flaws to that vision, right? The people who are actually in charge of implementing or executing on that vision are seeing that, hey, this guy's idea or this woman's idea of what we should be doing is not actually what our customers want, or not what the market wants, or isn't even physically possible. I think that that's the delicate balance, is when you do have some sort of like visionary type of CEO, then potentially there is like this 1 + 1 = 3 situation where people do things that they didn't think were possible. I think that's very rare though. I think more often than not, a leader will come in, have some grand visions, have some grand plan. But what I'm finding in these enduring businesses is, again, inverted. So innovation doesn't come from the top, it comes from the bottom. It comes from the worker who is actually working on the product or on the service. And those ideas filter up to the top. And the only reason it works is because the top is open to the idea of what the line worker actually, is suggesting. So you see, this isn't, completely uncommon. I was at John Deere a few months ago. I was at Amazon a couple of weeks ago in each of their, John Deere's factory and in an Amazon fulfillment center. Each of those organizations have basically like continuous improvement models where anyone within the organization can suggest a new idea about how to improve some process. And so there is a sort of Kaizen, constant improvement idea. But these are more the exception than the rule. And I think the more that we can think about leadership in the context of your job as a leader is not to tell your folks what to do, but to really inspire your team to think about their own jobs, their own craft, and how to improve that and how to filter those ideas back up to you to enable the entire organization to execute on what they think is the best, not necessarily what you think is the best.
You're going to guess what's on this card in this segment because it's the perfect segue into this. Before you guess, though, tell the people they want to follow the book, they want to get more information. Where are they looking online to find you?
I'm on Twitter, Eric Markowitz. I've also launched a website called outlastbook.com, where you can just sign up for my weekly newsletter, The Nightcrawler.
Go do all those things. I'm a very happy and satisfied customer and subscriber. Eric Markowitz, guess why you think I needed to show you this Christina Garnett Vic Ruggiero clip?
I think a few, like one, I think a lot about just creating meaningful writing and content. I hate that word content, but because it kind of, I don't know, it's a very vanilla word, but just creating some sort of content for people that is genuinely valuable. And then also later in her segment, she talks about just the value of the human approach in a world that's increasingly going digital and AI. And so for me, how that expresses itself is just like really thinking about community. How can we create not just digital communities, but in-person communities? And as you know, I'm hosting like a small event in a few weeks that unfortunately you can't come to, but I'll be doing more of these meetups and in-person gatherings for people to just connect with one another. Because one thing AI can't do is become sort of the hub of a community, right? AI can't yet just organize a meetup for my newsletter subscribers or for our investors. And when you create these in-person events, what you find is the value is not you necessarily from you talking to the people who come to see you. it's from seeing like someone from your network talk to another person from your network and seeing like that cross pollination. And that's what I find like super valuable and really fun, and just something that gives me a lot of joy to see that happen in the real world.
It's an amazing thing to see. So I wrote this down. I said, businesses need to be a part of people's everyday lives first, and that lifetime presence is what follows. Now, here's a funny little detail on this, and part of why I wrote this down is Christina Garnett. Her primary job, her primary role is at something called a chief customer officer. Have you run into this word in some of your research so far?
Yeah.
What the point you were making just before of how it starts at the bottom, like you got to listen for that feedback. And who are the people listening to the feedback? Well, the people engaging with the customers.
Yeah.
If you don't have a top-down way to implement that type of feedback into your system, fragility ensues.
Yeah.
Like the only way any of these companies outlast is to have that feedback mechanism that says we're listening to our roots in the soil all the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, my book is very simple because I just go to businesses and I ask them basically one question: what has enabled you to outlast? And when I was in London a few weeks ago, where we spoke for our previous conversation, I was in Lock & Co Hatters, which is a hat company that has been around for about 400 years. And I was just asking the clerk who has worked there for about 30, 40 years. And I said, what has been the key reason? And he said, it's our customers. We develop real relationships with our customers. We know what they want. We know what they like. And we work with them, and then we work with their kids, and then we work with their grandkids. But it starts with a culture where you're listening to your customers. You really care about your customers. And in a mindset of growth, you're often not listening to your customers. You're rate limited by time. And so given the X amount of time you have, you end up spending most of it looking for the next customer as opposed to listening to your current customer. And so that just creates a pattern of instability because you keep losing customers and you keep having to, it's like a bucket of water with a hole at the bottom. You just got to keep filling more water because you get people at the bottom coming out. And so my message just very initially is like, well, just focus on your current customers, right? Like listen to them, make sure that they're happy. This is not a like remarkably new insight. Plenty of very, very smart business leaders, like especially Jeff Bezos, has consistently talked about this. Just focus on your customer, like be obsessed with your customer, and don't necessarily be focused on chasing the next one. That is just like an enduring message to me. And you see it in enduring businesses. You don't see it necessarily in like hyper growth startups that flame out after 3 years.
Here's to changing let fires burn to, hang out around the campfires, right?
Yeah.
Eric Markowitz, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you, Matt Zeigler.
Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Zeigler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.